But Christian is somebody that we reached out to because the mission of Hopworks and what they're doing is very aligned to what has brought us all here today in terms of like finding ways to add to things like sustainability and having a positive impact on the earth and making that into what we do in our business models in a variety of different ways. And so since we are a networking organization that largely meets over beer, it made sense for us to explore how that comes to life in beer. So Christian, I wondered maybe if you could just start it off by telling us just a little bit about like what gave you the idea to start the company, and then tell us some of the basics of how sustainability comes into play for you guys.
Yeah, so I really appreciate you guys coming. It's awesome to see such a group of enthusiastic environmentalists and seeing so many cool individual stories.
And beer drinkers.
Beer drinkers, thank you for being thirsty, and how everybody's on their own journey, right? So our journey started. I'm 40, I just turned 49 like 2 weeks ago. Been married. August 30th will be my 25th wedding anniversary. I got 2 kids, 14 and 17. So, just I'm on my journey and really trying to make business a reflection of my personality and my love for people and the planet and all that, and trying to balance all that. So, we started out Hopworks 14 years ago. My wife and I did. We have no other stakeholders. We're out of debt now after COVID and really swinging for the fences. So the journey for Hopworks 14 years ago, I printed out the Lead for Buildings template. My dad was an architect from Syracuse. We grew up in San Francisco. He was building ranger stations and outhouses for the Forest Service. And so basically, and my mom's a school teacher, right? So kind of, my mom's like this awesome, I guess, people, she's a people person, I will say that. And so grew up with her in my ear. We were always like recycling, and her dad was an Episcopal minister who walked on Washington with Martin Luther King. And like, so there's always this little bit of kind of Episcopalian social justice kind of in my ear. And then my dad's this German architect, with this kind of eye for quality. And there's a right and wrong, but he was conflicted because he was an artist too. So grew up in this design space and this educational space, and also this idea that there is a higher calling other than just trying to monetize what you're doing for your own personal gain, right? So 14 years ago, I printed out Lead for Buildings template. We bought the building, which was 1.5 acres, so we overbought on property and building, knowing we wanted to grow into it, thinking we would sublease, and we, over the next couple of years, ended up growing into about every square foot of the space. And so that journey over 14 years started with a very kind of rustic, just personal desire to like have a sustainable brewery. People have been gathering around beer or fermented beverages since the last ice age receded, sometime between 9,000 and 13,000 years ago, depending on what latitude they grew up at. Somebody's been baking and crude bread to render the sugars, the starch in the grain soluble as a form of sugar that can then be fed to yeast. In that case, the yeast was in the air. Now we know that it's a vital organism that can be isolated and cleaned up, and hopped with whatever. The sources of clean water were prevalent. Now, the clean water and everything, that's a challenge in addition to climate justice as well. So we knew we wanted to have a sustainable brewery. I kind of divide business up into like 4 groups. Just in my brain, I just got to contain it in quadrants. And the first thing is core and shell. Like your building is a super important thing. It's easy to neglect that, as a lot of people. It's been hard generationally to build wealth around real estate. So not everybody has that eye of, if you're renting, you might not have that keen eye on the opportunities that the real property represents. But I start with the core and shell. And so as my dad, was architect, and we could never move into somebody else's shell, we had to really build something from the ground up or heavily modify something to call it our own. In this case, we printed the Lead for Buildings template and DIY'd it. I couldn't afford the certification, so we said, screw it, I'll just go point for point. Pervious pavers, drought-tolerant native species, reclaimed building, white reflective roof that reflects the majority of the heat, so that your refrigeration that's remoted to the roof has a cooler ambient temperature to discharge the heat from the building and the other and the coolers outside the building. And then you go into the insulation and the glazing, and all these things just kind of come together as the core and shell. And then the systems, obviously, the HVAC, lighting. We just did a full lighting upgrade at the brewery, so we've got full LEDs with motion sensors. But that came about 14 years after we started, because you go through. You first start, the city doesn't even know what the hell a waterless urinal is, and then when they do know what it is, they won't allow it because they haven't approved it yet, because nobody's eaten one or something. And then they finally allow it, and then you're finally allowed to go buy one and install it. So we couldn't do a lot of this stuff in the beginning, so it's been this steady upgrade. So, core and shell and some of those energy systems. And then the next thing would be sourcing. Like, what are you bringing into the building in terms of to operate your business? Those are everything from, ingredients to maybe how you source your power and things like that. And then within, so you got this whole sourcing thing, and then you got operational efficiency. How efficient can you be as an operation? Utilize every molecule that comes into the building, make sure there's very little waste. And then what you can't use efficiently, you have a waste stream, right? So you've got essentially, you want to have a model for zero waste as well. So zero waste would be your compost systems, your recycling systems, so that reduce, reuse, recycle is ever present. And I know it's got 5 arms now instead of just the 3. But you really want to use things efficiently. You want to make the right amount of stuff, and then you want to waste as little as possible. So we have the zero waste initiative as well. We are happy to say that we vector 95% of what we bring in the building to away from the landfill. So we've got a huge diversion rate from the landfill. So there's that. That's the fourth piece. Is like, what do you do with your waste after you've built a cool building, and then after you've really vetted your suppliers, after you've operated efficiently, and then the very last thing is that tailpipe. What are you doing to really mitigate your waste and dispose of things responsibly? Humans have an incredible environmental toll on the planet. We're extractive by nature. A lot of life is, and I spent the vast majority of my free time outside. We ski all year. Now we're in I was mountain biking last night. I got home about 11:30. We did a standing Thursday night riding in the clear cuts out in Scappoose. So where we ride is Rocky Point Trail System. You're in and out. There's very little established old growth. I think only about 3% of the old growth remaining in the United States. So when you spend a lot of time outside, you really see firsthand the impact that the foresters see the trees around here as nothing more than a farm to maximize its output. It's not a habitat, right? So as a business, like my word, I was talking to Topher about this earlier, like habitat is incredibly important now, and our impact on the habitat is measurable, it's real. Your whole group is about climate justice and this whole journey, and how do you monetize, or how do you change your behavior to be a responsible business citizen and business. So we found that the most comprehensive eco label that we carry, after trying on a lot of things like DIYing this whole DIYing LEED for buildings, so you have the construction piece, and trying on 1% for the planet, which couldn't speak to social justice and George Floyd and gender inequality and stuff like that. There was no voice for that in that, so we said, fuck it, we're going to go on our own. We're going to do 0.5% for the planet, 0.5% for the people. And so we're trying to find our own ways to bring those things to life meaningfully. And we found that B Corp being our North Star is the most meaningful and comprehensive way to address everything from climate to social justice to financial. I think that the other leg of the stool, we're always kind of a little reluctant to talk about profitability and things like that, and that's the third leg of the stool. It's social, environmental, and economic, right? It's a fool's errand to spend money on a company that isn't doing the right things. Talking with Topher, I think as democracy's been corrupted, you can look at your voting for your dollar as probably your strongest vote in the modern world, right? And so you not only want to patronize and bring more B Corp or sustainable businesses into your fold, thoughtful people into your fold, and you want to be available. So we call it the B economy. There's a B local group, and so it's a really strong movement where there's currently only about 39 breweries in the whole world that are B Corp, right? And we were the first one in the Pacific Northwest. It's a very inclusive thing. I talk about it, a lot to folks, but everybody coming out of COVID just got their asses handed to them. They're lucky to get PPP loans and get them forgiven, and they're in survival mode. So it's hard to self-actualize or business actualize when you're just trying to survive. You know, we had our industry had a really tough go through COVID, and we're just so happy to be here, and like we survived, right? And now it's time to start thriving again. And so we're back in those deep discussions. What did we learn through the riots in Portland? How do we bring social justice, elevate that to a higher level in terms of our dialogue here and sustainability? You know, from how we hire, we were able to generate $5,000 for the PDX NAACP through COVID, through some fundraising. We were able to get 400 reclaimed masks sewn for Central City Concern. But this 400 years of inequity in the U.S., you know, it's a lot to unwind, and it's a lot to unwind as a business, and as a white male, it's tough to unwind too, and try and but the key is, if you're not uncomfortable, you're not doing the work, right? So it's just a whole bunch of uncomfortable discussions to get to a better place collectively. And having kids that are 14, 17, and way smarter than I am, they're like decades ahead of me in terms of the dialogue they're having, the way they challenge. Like that's the daily, I think the daily barometer is like, what are they interested in? The things I say that used to be funny as a kid are totally inappropriate, you know, these days. And like we're all putting my foot in my mouth constantly, because I'm kind of the silly guy and the smart ass, and I find myself like, God, the world's changed, you know. So environmental and social justice is the new way to operate. The bylaws, how you put that into a measurable system within your company, is incredibly important, because if it ain't written down, and if we can't track it, you know, you can't manage it, you know, it's not going to happen. So I love, you know, there's a quick assessment tool in the B Corp, so I'll get off my soapbox in a second, but go do the quick assessment tool on the B Corp website. Like, if you want to put yourself to sleep tonight, just kind of hunt around on there, see the companies, see if there's any one that you're like, oh, that's cool, I already like that company, I didn't know they had a framework to congratulate themselves on their challenges, but also highlight their opportunities to grow in the future. You know, so I really like what B Corp does. The 1% for the planet thing's cool. It's just like, you know, a lot of people that are like, you know, offshoring their manufacturing, that's an easy way to do it. If you have high margins, 1% means nothing, right? But in a low margin space where we'd love to put 5, 6, 7 points to the bottom line every year, putting 1% of that, you know, to something that somebody else is giving you to dictate to you know, you want to do something, maybe personalize it a little more, and in this case, do something that's a little more socially appropriate as well. So, so the journey, like we're looking out the next 14 years right now. So just say we're 15 years. We're reflecting about our axis right now. We're 14 years old. We're doing the middle. Like my work right now is all about strategy and trying to get another location. Going. Looked at 2 sites yesterday. Today was about design feasibility work, trying to possibly develop this property with a super sustainable mixed-use building. It would be retail, possibly B Corp offices on one level and 2 layers of high-efficiency residential, and then a full rebrand. So we're rebranding the company after 14 years because we realized that you know, you kind of paint yourself into a corner over time, and you're like, wow, people don't know about Hopworks or Hub. We got probably one more color than we need in our identity system. The font is a fucking Russian constructivist font. And I know. I showed him.
So us how to rebrand things.
Yeah, I showed him our little design book we got last night, and we have a Russian constructivist font that we bought from a Slovenian artist for $500 when we first opened, called Red October. But, you know, given the Ukrainian issue and the horrible situation that they're in, you know, it's probably time to ditch the Red October font too. You know, but who would have thought that would be like a topic based on the Ukrainian conflict? There's an awesome TV show giving the backstory on the Ukrainian conflict right now. I watched 2 nights ago. Fucking mind blower how they've been trapped between 2 horrible forces between Russia and the Nazis. Like, just what the Ukrainians have gone through. I went from being kind of uninformed and sympathetic, like mildly sympathetic, to like, holy shit, we need help, you know? Like, it's really horrible what they've had to deal with over First and Second World War. But anyway, different dialogue there. So B Corp, important. Also, I'm on the board of Salmon Safe, so we've united around water issues as a core value. And so I'm on the board of Salmon Safe. We make about 90% of the hops we source are Salmon Safe certified. So trying to use more. That second piece is that sourcing. What are we bringing into the building? So we just put a new organic silo in. So I'd say about 25% of the beer we make is certified organic. The hops are 90+% Salmon Safe certified, and then just continuing to we have trimester nonprofit partners we work with for volunteer opportunities that also kind of frame up our eco giving. So we work with Friends of Trees for replanting, so we're into forestry, kind of reforestation, carbon sequestration through the lens of urban trees. Trimester 2 is alternative transportations. The group that maintains trails that we were riding last night, Northwest Trails Alliance, we work with them to basically get bikes off the road more or less and get people excited about two-wheel transportation. So we had our bike commute challenge last month, and so I think I rode 17 to 20, 13 to 20 trips, my 14-mile round trip. So even personally, I'm okay, how do I get the car off the road? I'm trying to live by example. And then T3 is Columbia River Keepers. We work with them to work on river cleanup. So we hit trees, alternative transportation, and water. And then globally, our water initiatives are really about efficiency in our plant. And we use about half to 2/3 of the water per gallon of beer that our peers use in our production science.
How do you guys manage that alone? Because when I started to think about just sustainability and how it relates to just beer, my head did go to water pretty quickly. And so what is it? What are the major areas that you have to be careful of? Because I can imagine it's is it this? Is it the production side? Is it the agricultural side? Where do you guys work on your systems to just deal with water?
The low-hanging fruits in the operations, because there's a lot of opportunity to be either really wasteful with water, really mindful with water. And water is really expensive because your sewage bill is built on your water use. It's not a separate calculation, right? So your cubic feet of water coming in is essentially seen as leaving entirely in wastewater as well, when the wastewater is the most expensive aspect of it. So being efficient up front, that reduced aspect of it is really important. So through good training, through flow meters, we're about to upgrade our brew house to a high efficiency brew house, which should make us extremely efficient, where we would press the water out of the grain versus draining it like you would brew coffee. Imagine if you could take your coffee grounds and squeeze them out, you get 30% more water out of them. Right? So that's what we're looking at doing. And on the municipal side, there's not really a lot you can do other than tractor bills and stuff like that. So I just look at efficiency. You don't have choices in your supply stream. You've got therms of natural gas, you've got kilowatts of electricity, and then you've got your cubic feet of water, and then the other things are pounds of grain per gallon of beer. So all these things, we call them intensity metrics. So we have a benchmarking tool that we use to manage our utilities. It's through our national organization. They have this free benchmarking tool. We use that to manage to create a PAR and then to manage reduction targets over time. Yes, sir.
Does pressing process actually make a different flavored beer?
Oh, does the pressing? It does not change the flavor. There's some, like Crux Brewery in Bend. You guys probably like them. They're using one. Full Sail's using one. About 20% of the beer is made on these things already. So it's very common way to separate solids from other industries. But yeah, great question.
Is there like a
Yeah, we do have I bought a $250,000 centrifuge too, so we spin the beer out at 7,000 RPMs, and it basically takes the beer-rich hop and yeast particles and essentially squeezes the beer out of them. So we get 4% more beer out of every tank in doing that. So there's a lot of stuff you can do. And energy is incredibly expensive in terms of therms and natural gas and kilowatts of power. So doing a little bit of a solar study here, but we'll probably dedicate the solar work here. Old buildings don't like to have arrays, don't like to have their roofs loaded up. So we have to look at the new building we'll build here as a real opportunity for solar going forward. gas efficiency is like essentially about buying, like we did 8 residential furnaces with heat pumps here instead of buying commercial gas packs, because residential units you get up to like 96% efficiency, but you get like 84% efficiency out of gas packs on the roof. So it's like that was a huge delta. Like so it's just like thoughtful decisions about making something modular and easy to repair, modular, serviceable, and high efficiency.
The 4%. What's the payback on that centrifuge? That $250,000 centrifuge?
It was about
4%.
Yeah, I think it was about 3 years on that.
Okay.
It doesn't take much,
Okay.
Yeah, so really any like ROI wise, like I just did a solar study in my house. Finally, after talking around, I was like, how long do I need to live in my house before this makes sense? Because one guy said 8 years, another cat said 10 years. So like if you're not gonna live in your house for 10 years, it's tough to monetize that. But if you did it up front, you can beat these problems in the world are built in like they're solved in planning, So you can plan it out. It's a huge cost benefit to plan these things out of existence versus trying to knock them on the tail end. So there's all this stuff, and ultimately we're just trying to be thoughtful, create a thoughtful resource or a thoughtful option for folks telling the story. Like I really appreciate you guys, listening and being curious and being successful in your own way, because you're here. This is a huge success, even that you're on the Slack. I didn't know what Slack is. I just saw Slack for the first time. But you're in a Slack group that's all about climate justice and stuff. Is such a huge victory. So I applaud you guys for having those uncomfortable discussions, having the dialogue, creating a group of like-minded people that give a shit and can help change the world. Because it's like we're in some major deep shit in this world. We've got to move swiftly, and unfortunately high prices seem to really affect people's behavior. So actually gas prices are high right now, because the last time they were high around when the economy crashed, that's where the subcompact SUV came about, was because that first fuel crisis, right? And they've stuck around, so the next one will change behavior again. So unfortunately I feel like the economics motivate people more than anything else. But that's okay if it answers the question. So spend your money wisely and try and be efficient.
One or two more questions. Anybody else?
Yeah, what's up?
What are the influence as far as policy, like its impact on the city and how that affects the house?
Well, getting those high visibility crosswalks was a huge victory, because 26 and Powell is one of the worst intersections in the state in terms of traffic accidents and stuff like that, and pedestrian safety. So now we've got the high vis bike crosswalk here, 28th, and then there's 2 more high vis crosswalks at the street, which is a huge victory, because every one of those crosswalks was $125,000. It took years for them to get it going, and so I can't say we're a huge part of that, other than we were one of the first gathering places in this near side of Powell. Was like, oh shit, well all of a sudden people are moving across, need to move across that street a little more easily rather than playing Frogger like they were. People still do it. Even with those high vis crosswalks, they still don't want to walk the block either way to go to utilize them. So I mean, it's really, it's a state highway. It's also, it's got county jurisdiction, city, state, so everybody's in the pot, and it's hard to get stuff done. It's like the Columbia Crossing. Like, how long have they been talking about replacing that bridge is something better? But yeah, little micro movements, and hopefully we're just trying to help where we can. So yeah, it really is. I ride my bike here all the time. Like, people can't believe I ride my bike on the Ross Island Bridge. It's actually nice when you get to sweep the deck, But yeah, there's easy ways to move around. Just gotta get creative. Don't be afraid to poke your head out of the tent. Any other questions? I'm going back to the Northeast. No, we did look at the farmer's barn over there in Denver the other day. That little shithole. The guys from Doug Fur owned it. They were going to put it can you believe that? Like they had it sat on, couldn't figure out what to do with it, and now it's on the market again. So we're looking all around for another. We always want to have real property attached to it, because that's the only. I mean, not the only. It's a great way to just build long-term wealth, is to have real property attached to your businesses. As you're growing your own businesses, buy the building. try to, don't give yourself into a bad lease. That's that first discussion is about the core and shell of that building. It's just a huge part of your potential success. Yeah, I love the questions. I'm heading to Nahale for a camping right now. But really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We really appreciate
Yeah,
it.
sure. I always run the risk of talking too much. So
No. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
It's an open door. Like I really love the whole sustainable journey. There's no stupid questions. The B Corp thing is a high lift. So as you guys look through that assessment, if we can help at all, like answer questions, you're probably close. If just the fact that you're here, you're probably closer in your own. Are there any B Corps in the group right now?
Aspiring.
Aspiring, yeah. So, yeah, let's see if we can all raise our hands in a year's time. Like at least go through the quick assessment, see what it's all about, and because that is really the most comprehensive tool to honestly self-assess, and you're probably closer than you think. And it's a great networking tool too. Like you're a networking group, right? So it's like there's a lot of value. Don't be afraid to be financially successful as a result of your ability to be sustainable, but also market that. Like it's okay to brag about the good shit you're doing. Cool. All right, you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Christian.
Yeah. Cue the music.
Good beer too.
We're,
Good beer.
Right on. Thank you very much. Yeah, we got a lot of great beers on. If you guys like pilsners, we have a German and an Italian pils on around. The difference between the two.
Uni.
Uni's undry hop. The Italian pils is dry hop, a little more bitter. Awesome IPAs. We're working on the rebrand and a couple new flagship beers. So this whole new identity system is super fun journey. There's some great beers on tap as well. Yeah. So appreciate you guys hanging out.
yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Well,
See you
Nahale.
guys next time.
Appreciate it.
Stays lit.
Cool. All right. See you guys.
We're gonna have one more chat. So one of the things we wanted to start to try to do was we all sit down and like kind of like talk to each other, and sometimes you talk to the same person week on week and month on month and that type of thing. So we just wanted to start doing some quick highlights of businesses, people that are doing stuff within the group. So we'll make the next one just like, we're not going to make Marcelino talk too long or anything like that, but Marcelino volunteered to lead it off. This is an experiment like all of these things, so we'll see how well it works, and like we're down to try different things, but Marcelino is going to tell us a little bit about his business. So yeah, welcome Marcelino.
Did you do this in his sleep?
No, thanks for having me. This is great.
Yeah. So I only have like 3 like quick questions. So like structure it however you want. But like the first would just be Marcelino was one of the first people that I actually met in this group. I'd love for you to just share a little bit about what your company does and your journey towards founding it.
Sure. So my company is called Photon Marine, and we're developing electric outboard motor systems for commercial tourism transportation operators. So we're looking at the fleet use case for electrification.
And why does that matter?
I think it matters for a couple of reasons. I think if you look at a lot of the places where these vessels operate, they're operating in the most fragile marine ecosystems in the world. And for a variety of reasons, they've stuck on legacy technologies. They're using two-stroke outboard motors, which are incredibly harmful for the environment. They're like releasing 25 to 40% of their fuel into the water column, and they release tons of greenhouse gases. I think compared to the recreational boaters, they're using their boats 10 to 15 times more per year. So the impact of their usage is 10 to 15x, and they need those places that they're operating in to survive. Otherwise,
It's interesting because in terms of electrification, have you found it difficult to get people to get into a mindset shift and just how marine is just as important as sort of cars? Like I think we all think of cars, and then the next place I think of is planes. Is it difficult to get people to do a mindset shift, and what helps them to start to understand marine travel needs?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I think some folks do get caught up on like the numbers, right? They're like, well, the automotive industry is $1 trillion business, and marine might only be a $50 billion business. Why does this matter, right? They're looking at the economics, but I think if you look at sort of the impact, 70% of our seafood comes from artisanal fishers that are operating in these areas. 60% of the world's major cities are in these coastal communities. And so the way that you measure both the impact of sticking to the old system as well as the opportunity cost of not switching to electric isn't just about the dollars of the economy, but it's also about the actual impact, not just to those immediate businesses, but the food supply chains and then the economies of a lot of these coastal towns. And for many of these economies, they're the primary source of revenue for these countries is from tourism. And so if we don't make this switch, you're not going to be able to take a vacation to Hawaii and go scuba dive or snorkel on those reefs, because that reef isn't going to exist. You're not going to be able to benefit it. So I think the impact of not switching to electric is so monumental in scale, and I think sometimes it takes a little bit of convincing, and it's sort of a pathway to broader electrification efforts. So you start with the smaller vessels, and then you work way up there.
Yeah. What made you, as somebody who, well, tell us a little bit about your background, I guess, and what brought you here, and then what made you focus on this specific problem?
Yeah. So I'm a generalist. I think that's the most important thing to kind of realize. I thought I wanted to be an engineer out of college and realized that engineering was not for me, and I stumbled my way from a startup into advertising. Spent the first part of my career in advertising. I worked for a number of notable agencies, and then decided to start my own product design studio. Did that for about 10 years and sold it before the pandemic. The pandemic for me shifted, I think, everything. I think for a lot of us. I'm also a dad. I've got 3 little ones, a soon-to-be 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 8-week-old. And
Congrats.
I think in the middle of the pandemic, I found myself just struggling for purpose, right? Like the way that we did things before the pandemic and what we did on the other side of it needed to be different. And I reached out to a friend of mine who's been in fisheries nonprofits for a while, and now he's one of our co-founders. And just catching up, I was like, Charles, what's a piece of technology that would be absolutely transformational for the world that we're in? And we talked about a number of things, and the one that just stuck with me was we need to electrify the vessels that operate in these fishing communities, because if we don't, there's no amount of conservation that's going to catch up. I grew up in South Florida, been a lifelong boater. I was like, man, let's just go stick some torpedoes on these Jamaican fishing boats, and we'll just go from there. And very quickly realized that the technology that existed was insufficient to meet the energy needs of some of those basic applications. Also realized, soon thereafter, that the Jamaican fishers weren't necessarily the first market for this, but you needed a first mover. And as I looked at electrification and other things that had worked in electrification, the theme that started emerging was like, what does an electric bus look like on the water, right? What's a vessel that leaves from the same spot, goes to the same spot, and comes back? And as we kind of looked at that, we said, there are a lot of tourism applications, right? Whale watching, scuba snorkel, water taxi. They just look at, they look exactly like a bus. They go out and back, out and back. The trip is 2.5 hours. They sit for 2.5 hours and they go back out. And rather than focusing on all the, range anxiety at sea, or what happens if someone wants to go 80 miles, I said, that's not a great case for electrification today. Let's look at the electrification case that's that out and back trip. And reached out to a former client of mine, who used to work at Carnival before, and I was like, Tara, here's this thing I've been thinking about. She's going to be the CEO of a social impact line for Carnival Corp and the chief impact officer for them. And I was like, do you think this would make sense for a Carnival Corp from a shore excursion standpoint? She's like, that seems really interesting. Send what you've got. So I sent her all my paperwork and kind of research. She's like, hey, I'm looking for the next leg of my journey. Could I join you? And I was like, yeah, that'd be awesome. And so she came on board as chief strategy officer. I got connected to our CTO, Nick, through a mutual connection, who's also sitting over there on his phone. I was like, Matt, looking for someone who knows EV systems, and I think we can build a prototype of the system. That's like, oh, you got to talk to Nick. And and Nick knows everybody here in town that's been building EV systems. So, you know, it's kind of a path to like discovery, finding people who might be able to solve a small part of the problem. But the scale of that problem is actually really big when you look at like how many businesses that operate on the water are just going out the back, out the back, out the back. And we're like, let's start there. Let's crush that, and then we can expand. And yes, we can get better range, the batteries get better, and further along with new product offerings. But let's solve a problem that has scale out of the get-go because these operators are using their boats, 1,500 hours a year.
My last question that I had was, through this journey, what have you learned about the climate industry in Portland? Like, why Portland? What's unique about this space? Like, what have you learned about this city that's different?
Yeah. Let me preface this by saying, like, I love Portland, and I will also then throw an asterisk in it, in that like Portland has been sort of at this like weird inflection point for a really long time, and that inflection point is frustrating because it's like, is this city gonna like grow up and figure out what the hell it wants to be, or is it just gonna like be this like second tier kind of city? And that is both an opportunity and a challenge for us, right? Like, there are so many great things about Portland, and there's so many like subcultures and communities that like when you discover, you're like, how did I not know about this? Like, when I met Nick, and Nick's like, hey, here's this group of EV people that are just doing like really awesome shit on Swan Island, and you go out there, you're like, how did I not know this existed, right? Like, that is like that adds 5 to 10 years of like my lifespan in Portland. And then you throw in the background of like what Christian was saying, like, this is a city that was like invaded by DHS, has an incumbent city governance, and at the same time has people that like come from all sorts of like backgrounds that are trying to like solve things each day. And so like these things are generally in conflict, right? And I've gone through this exercise with like friends and people like over the years of like, if not Portland, where, right? Like, our entire nation is under attack. We have a Christo-fascist like Supreme Court that is continuously just like pushing us in a direction that like isn't sustainable. And so the idea of like operating this business and any of the other places that like might make sense. Why not Florida? I grew up in Florida. I love Florida above the water. I love Florida below the water. I don't love Florida from a governance standpoint, right? I'm not a Florida man. I could never run this business in Florida because I would have a hard time putting my kids in a school where they can't say the word gay. My brother-in-law and sister-in-law, right? Like, for me, running a progressive company that is solving a climate tech issue means that we have to have our base of operations in a place where I can have this conversation and not have people be like, well, let's talk about both sides. And it's like, there is no both sides to half of this stuff, right? There just isn't. And the equivocating and the fear, what I really appreciate about what Christian said is like, yeah, I make beer, but I stand for social justice issues. Like, that's fucking cool. And I think that, like, as I think about all these businesses that like throw ESG out there and say like, here's the boxes that we're gonna check, but at the same time are like, funding a political party that is like just anti-democratic values, like, those two things cannot exist in concert. What I love about Portland is that this is a place where I can say, here's my fucking politics. Get on or get off, right? Like, that is it. And we're gonna solve really big existential issues because it's not about me. Like, I want my kids to grow up in a place where like they can understand that the impact of the work that I do is allowing them to enjoy those waters that I grew up with in a better way. Oregon's one of the only, one of 3, 4, 5 states in this entire country where like I can feel pretty damn sure that if I throw them in school today, by the time they graduate, they're still gonna have a state that's run by, a democratic government, right? Like, I can't say that about most states in this country. So that's why I'm betting on Oregon. What I found about climate tech, and like discovering new cultures, new people, new groups, it's a super inclusive group. There's people that are driven by purpose. And that purpose isn't necessarily, about a lifestyle business or a nonprofit. It's about solving really big problems. We're building hardware. Hardware is hard. I want to build hardware. I want to solve the hard thing. Not an offense for anyone who's building something that's maybe simpler, but like, I am motivated by the things that everyone says is really impossible. And this is a place where people wake up and they're like, yeah, let's get after it. So yeah, I don't think I could do this in any other city other than Portland, and that is in spite of all the challenges Portland has. And then I think by doing things in this place, we can, sort of like light the beacon of like, hey Portland, get your shit together, right? Like here's the things you need to figure out. And we say that not out of spite, but out of love. I love this city. It's a great city. It is a city that is accessible. You can reach out to anybody, and they'll answer your email. They'll take a meeting. They'll grab a coffee or a beer, and that's very, very rare. So this city is awesome. It's got some stuff to figure out, and that's okay because you know what? Everybody's got some stuff to figure out. And so the question is like, are we going to ride this inflection point and like get over the hump, or are we going to crash? And the people in this room, in this outdoor room, we're the ones that are going to be able to shape that because ultimately I think more and more companies are going to be around purpose, around climate, around solving the big existential problems, not about optimizing a widget. And that's okay if you're optimizing optimize that widget, but ultimately I think we should be going after bigger stuff because if nothing else, like the pandemic has shown, like shit is temporary. We're only here for so long, and it is super fragile and quick. So like, if you've got the brain power, the energy, and the motivation, take a big swing. Just go for it and solve that thing.
Any questions for Marcelino?
I got one. Well, right off the bat, I really think most everybody here is probably on the same page with you on how your visions are. The question is, what is your price point figure coming in now compared to a comparable gas-driven vehicle in the same thing?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a lot more expensive, right?
I know, that's what I
But the thing that's helping us right now, so like gas outboard motor for one of our their 300 horsepower motor might cost 30 grand after that. Our system might cost 3x, right? Maybe 3.5x. The thing that's helping us right now is that marine fuel's at $7 a gallon. The supply chain has been completely crushed by the COVID pandemic. So for those people that are operating their existing motors, they're not able to find the parts, so they're being forced to replace their system sooner than they otherwise would. Time off the water costs them money. The commercial operators don't have a choice of do I go out on the water or not because gas is expensive. They have to go out on the water. The pandemic has destroyed the number of tourists that are going to these places. It's also impacted the workforce. They have fewer crew, fewer passengers, but they still have to go out, so they're still spending the fuel. And one of the things that we thought early on was like, we're going to need a leasing option to make this work because no one's going to spend 100 grand or spend 30. Of the 45 systems that we've sold via an LOI, none of them have asked for a lease because they recognize that the payback period is now 2.5 or 3 years. And for them, they're like, I'm willing to make that bet today because it pays off. It's cheaper to own and operate, and it pays off sooner than it otherwise would. And we can't keep doing business as normal. I think the revelation is they can't keep going the same way that they were because their businesses won't survive and their customers are asking for more. And that's I think the beginning of the shift. Is gas going to be $7 a gallon forever? No. I certainly hope it gets back down to a reasonable amount. But is this enough, again, like what Christian was saying, like is this enough to like start shifting the behavior? Like what's the crossover SUV version of this on marine fuel? It's like there are a number of operators that are saying it's time to really consider electric seriously because we otherwise would.
And if you add solar charging and building them, your infrastructure on land, so that overnight you're recharging with what you got free during the day, how does that integrate? How much your service charging would you take on land do you think would make you an overnight charge?
Short answer is it depends, right? But solar on top of some of our customers' roads is even possible. And so that might reduce their need to kind of charge. And that would make the payback very much realistic. Yeah. And so as we talk to like governments and nonprofits and organizations that help make electrification possible, this starts looking like solar in a lot of cases in terms of how you finance it. But it also means that you could structure a microloan for a small business and say, rather than paying your fuel cost, pay down this lease, and at the end of that lease pay down, you can redeploy that capital. And we're doing that with some of our government contracts now, government customers, to say, make these incentives available to make it easier. So that's coming. And the U.S. has its own stuff. Joe Manchin be damned. that it's working on. Fuck that guy. And you know, other countries are working on things as well to like make it as accepted as possible. But in other functioning democracies and even non-democracies, like you'll see this consensus commercially over time.
Tyler Philippi, Flex Charging. I just wanted to know what can I do to help Photon Marine be successful? Is there anything I can do? Is like I'm a fan of you and the company. No, I'm being serious. Just because I know him before the pitch doesn't mean I know him more. How can we be supportive and help make this successful from our limited by boats?
It's our ecosystem.
Other than buying a boat, I live in Vancouver. I'm going to drive here. I'm not going to boat
You
here.
can take a ferry from Vancouver to Portland.
Yeah, the Frog Ferry.
Support frog ferries.
Yeah.
Awesome. We are fundraising. SEC. If you're interested in what we're working on, please reach out. We're raising money, so accredited investors only. Accredited investors only, unless I get something that's set up on Republic. I guess it's also accredited investors. Accredited investors, reach out. We're focused squarely on delivering our 300 horsepower prototype at the Miami Boat Show next February. That'd be the fastest electric outboard motor ever built. We're super excited about it.
I mean, who doesn't want to go fast?
Who doesn't want to go fast?
Right?
Torque. Think of all the torque. And if you're interested, reach out. We're looking for.
Is it quiet? The electric motors, are they quieter than the gas?
It's going to be quieter above the water, and we want to measure how much quieter it is below the water because cavitation is still a thing, even with an electric motor. That being said, there have been studies on the effects that cavitation and the engine noise have on whales and other megafauna. They impact foraging behaviors, reproductive behaviors, communication behaviors. So having systems that can be quieter above and below the water will certainly help those operators continue to operate these fragile marine ecosystems. So short answer is yes. The longer answer is we need to still research how much.
I mean, to me, that's a big one, right? So because that's suddenly a lot of people, like you can make a case for them to switch just because of the huge impact that everybody's aware.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and just the smells, right? Like so, there's a certain number of people every year that will suck on carbon monoxide at the back of a boat while wake surfing or wakeboarding, and they drown. The fumes that come off the back of a boat are pretty harmful, but the whales when they're coming up for air are sucking in those fumes. There's oil spills and gas spills, and yes, they've built better anti-fuel spillage systems, but up until a few recent years ago, like the amount of spills from fuel top off in marinas in the U.S. equals 15 Exxon Valdez oil spills. Wow! And we weren't measuring that because it's a drop here, a slick here. You go to a marina, you see that sheen on the surface, you're like, oh, that looks really pretty. Look at that rainbow. It's like, yeah, that adds up. That adds up. And so, removing our dependency on fossil fuels is good not just for us, but for the ecosystems that these vessels operate.
Okay, so if you have more questions for Marcelino, just ask him while we're all just like hanging out and having more beers. But thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, now we're going to turn the music back
Turn the
on.
music back on.
Thanks for organizing.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, if you guys have ideas for other stuff to do, if you want to share stuff that's going on in your company or anything like that, let me know. Because we'll keep doing these things. And I'll September 2nd is our next one of these things, so put it on the calendar now.
First Friday.
September 2nd, the Friday before Labor Day.
Yeah. There should be like First Friday.
September 2nd.
Yeah.
Cool.
Is that locked? Anyway, that's Labor Day weekend.
Is that Labor Day weekend?
It is.
I want to switch to First Fridays is my thing, because like we were doing them kind of scattershot.
Oh, I know.
Maybe we'll just
Maybe
go
October?
for it, and then October will be, or you're saying like do a different date.
Do it in October, yeah. Maybe
Okay.
do it second
I
Friday
hear
in
that.
September.
Nobody wants
Is
to
it
show up for Labor
First
Day.
Thursday's a thing in Portland? I've done that, but
Are
is
people,
First Friday a
like,
thing?
quick straw poll, do people prefer Fridays or do they prefer like a weekday of some sort? I'm happy to hang with Fridays. That was what won in a couple previous
In the
votes.
summers, if you look at the traffic noon anytime in Portland on Fridays, it's everyone's leaving for a long weekend.
Right.
We all take a half day. So
Yeah.
if you do it First Fridays in the summer, it's going to be like 50-50.
Would people show up for like a Thursday?
We used to run ours on Mondays, and we would have 100 people call in sick to work on Tuesday. So
I mean, I was surprised that people voted for Friday, personally. But I'm happy to do whatever
Yeah.
folks are down with.
I like Fridays. Maybe we move that one just because it's Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, and maybe do Thursdays in the summer, and then first Friday, like.
Okay.
You know,
I think you're good. Keep it with Friday. Go with your gut.
It's not. I'm following the crowd. I'm down for whatever y'all want.
I'm just saying, Labor Day weekend. That's a big one.
Listen, when you start standing
That's
in
a
front
bailout
and
of
talking,
town.
you become the leader. So now we're all going to follow you. So whatever you decide to do, we're just going to go along with.
Yeah, actually,
Okay,
you
cool.
Yeah.
I'd like to send you that
later.
later.
Where next?
The first
Where?
follower.
Here?
Location TBD as well. It won't be here. We're trying to mix it up. Yeah. So wherever.
What do you guys do?
E-commerce, beach gear.
Thanks for running the shotgun.
Cool. All right. Yeah.